All right, let's work on number 3. So this is a problem where we have, it says, which one of the following statements is false? I actually found more than one of them to be false. Okay, so that's an issue. But maybe now that I come back and do it, maybe I made a mistake. Okay, let's see. So we've got this situation where we have these houses built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in different neighborhoods. Okay, so let's go ahead through these problems. Houses in Pinewood Estates and houses built in the 1960s are mutually exclusive. Okay, mutually exclusive means they are disjoint. That means there's no overlap. Okay, disjoint, they are not joint. Okay, so they are completely separate, no overlap. Okay, so that would mean Pinewood Estates and 60s has zero overlap, and that is true. So that's a true statement. Okay. B says the events home is in Oakcrest and home built in the 1970s are dependent. Okay. First of all, I don't really like this term talking about dependent. Rather, there should be are related. Okay, there is an association. But in order to do that, we have to recall how do you tell if they are independent. Okay, so I have this. Here is that probability section of the formula chart. Okay, and the check for independence is not on there. Now, because we can use our notes basically this year in 2020, you could write that there for easy access. Now, here we need to check to see if independence, then the fact that given that B has happened should not change the probability of A occurring. And so you can see, the math to this, given that B has happened, the probability of A and B, okay, and I want that to be the exact same result as just A only. So let's go and compute that on this problem. So Oakcrest, okay, so let's just say it looks like I built Oakcrest in the 1990s. Let's see what I did overall. Oh, I did overall here. There was 220 overall. Okay. So I was seeing if, given that, out of 90, so 90, given that you are in the 1970s, okay, what is the overlap of Oakcrest and the 1970s? So that's 15 over 90 right there. And so what that right there is A given B. Okay? So out of all of the 1970s, B is the 1970s, A is Oakcrest. Okay. So what I need to do is check the probability of A overall. Okay. Well, A overall is Oakcrest overall. So that's this right here, 80 over 220. Okay? If 15 over 90 and 80 over 220 are the same numbers, then that means you being built in the 1970s did not change the rate at which you went into that neighborhood. Because overall, you still went in it at the same rate as overall. Okay, so that is not true. They are not equal to each other. Therefore, they are not independent. And unfortunately, they use that word dependent there. But anyway, okay, let's look at C. If a house is chosen at random, the probability that that house was built in the 1980s is 30 over 20, and that is the truth. Here was the 80s over the total, which was 220, and so that's a true statement. So A, B, and C are true so far. D. The probability that a randomly selected home was built in 1980s, so that's one of these 30, or is one of the 80 in the Oakcrest, okay, is 110 over 220. So let's see that. That is true, that if you added together those 80 plus these 30, you get 110. The problem is that you then just double counted that 5. So you would need to subtract it. That is the same thing as what this is saying here. 80s plus Oak Crest minus the 5 overlapped. So that should actually be 105 over 220, not 110. All right, so that's out. So I'm feeling good. I know that D is false, but I checked E, and let me add this. I'll come back to it and let me double check it again. I'm thinking E is wrong also. E says the probability that a randomly selected house in Shady Lane, so that's given that it was in Shady Lane, was built in the 60s. So that'll be the 60s and Shady Lane overlap. So I'm looking for, given that it was Shady Lane, actually I should write it this way. Given that it was Shady Lane, what's the probability that it was in the 1960s? So that would look like this. Out of all of the Shady Lane ones, then I want the Shady Lane and the 60s and Shady Lane. Okay, so that number on the denominator, Shady Lane, is, see, I did that wrong. Shady, all the, given that out of a 80, the probability that a randomly selected house in Shady Lane, so that means actually my denominator should be 80. Okay, and then the numerator is that overlap, which is 40. So you know what? That is a true statement then. So no E right there. Okay, so it is indeed just D. All right, there you go. I figured once I come back to that, I might find out what my mistake was. So there's your number 3.